Kelly Krauskopf, if you can't handle the heat, get out of the kitchen. If you were perfectly fine when Fever fans were bending over, kissing your ass, applauding your decisions, you better stand here and take it when Fever fans are pissed off, upset, and are voicing their displeasures. If our voice mattered that much then, you best believe it matters that much now.
The Indiana Fever president just made some comments about Caitlin Clark that have the entire basketball world talking. And let me tell you, the backlash was swift and brutal. When you try to downplay your franchise player's importance, karma has a funny way of reminding you who really runs the show. The fallout from this mess is absolutely wild. What do you think happens when organizations try to minimize their biggest stars?
Fever brand is going to get as big and go as far as Caitlin Clark takes it. And I don't think Kelly Krauskopf understands that. And the latest video that is surfacing, floating around, being consumed by Fever fans across the globe, because this is an international superstar they have on their hands. This may have been the straw that broke the camel's back.
So apparently someone at the Indiana Fever thought it would be a brilliant idea to go on record talking about how they want to build their brand beyond just Caitlin Clark, because nothing says smart business strategy like publicly diminishing the person who single-handedly saved your franchise from complete irrelevance, right? The comments came from Fever leadership, and I'm being generous calling it leadership here, where they talked about wanting to create an enduring brand like Apple while making sure everyone knows they don't want to rely too heavily on their foundational players. Foundational players, by the way, is corporate speak for the reason anyone gives a damn about our team.
We want to sustain the growth and the interest level in the franchise. I mean, this is about the Indiana Fever. Yes, we have a foundational player in Caitlin Clark and Leah Boston, and we're going to continue to add to that. But I want this team to be the leader in the country, and a brand, an enduring brand, like Apple or something. I mean, we have a real opportunity.
Let me break down exactly how tone-deaf these comments were. This executive basically said they want to sustain growth and interest in the franchise while simultaneously suggesting that Caitlin Clark, the person responsible for that growth and interest, shouldn't be the primary focus. It's like McDonald's saying they want to be known for more than just burgers while actively trying to hide the Big Mac. The immediate reaction from fans was exactly what you'd expect when you insult their intelligence. Social media exploded with people calling out the organization for being completely out of touch with reality. And honestly, they deserved every bit of criticism they got.
This isn't the NFL. This is the WNBA. A star is going to take the Fever where the Fever want to go. And that star is Caitlin Clark. Kelly, you're talking about being a leading brand. You're talking about sustaining growth, sustaining the interest level in the franchise. You know how that happens? Is if Caitlin Clark stays in Indiana, is if Caitlin Clark is participating in an entertaining and exciting brand of basketball that doesn't take away and diminish her skill sets, that doesn't turn off fans that have been following her for the last 3 to 5 years.
Here's what these brilliant business minds seem to forget. Before Caitlin Clark arrived, the Fever were drawing maybe 4,000 fans per game on a good night. Television ratings were so low they barely registered. The team was essentially invisible in the sports landscape. Then Cece shows up and suddenly they are selling out arenas, breaking attendance records, and actually relevant in national conversations. But somehow, in their infinite wisdom, they think this happened because of their amazing organizational structure and not because they have a generational talent who people actually want to watch play basketball. The delusion is absolutely staggering. The comparison to Apple is particularly hilarious because Apple became Apple by building their entire brand around revolutionary products that changed everything. They didn't succeed by trying to downplay the iPhone or pretend the iPad wasn't important. They embraced their game-changing innovations and built everything around them. What the Fever should be doing is exactly what successful franchises have always done with their superstars. When you have Michael Jordan, you don't try to minimize his impact. You build the entire organization around maximizing his talents. When you have Magic Johnson, you don't pretend the team would be just as popular without him. The Lakers didn't become Showtime by accident. The Bulls didn't become a global phenomenon by coincidence. These things happened because smart organizations recognized that they had special players and built their entire identity around showcasing those talents. But apparently, the Fever Brain Trust missed that memo. Instead of embracing the fact that they won the lottery with Caitlin Clark, they're worried about spreading the wealth and making sure everyone gets their shine. It's like they're more concerned with hurt feelings than winning championships. And let's talk about the timing of these comments because it makes them even more ridiculous. This came right after we've been watching Caitlin struggle with a system that doesn't maximize her abilities, that we've seen her having to fight for touches, deal with teammates who don't pass, and play in an offense that seems designed to make her less effective. So, when fans are already frustrated with how the organization is handling their superstar, what do? They go public with comments that basically confirm everyone's worst fears about their priorities. It's like they were trying to pour gasoline on a fire. The backlash was immediate and brutal. Fans started questioning whether the organization actually deserves to have Caitlin Clark. People began talking about how she might be better off elsewhere when her contract situation allows it. The exact opposite of what you want when you're trying to build a sustainable brand. And here's the kicker. They are absolutely right to be concerned. Caitlin Clark isn't just going to stick around forever if the organization doesn't show they're committed to winning. She's too talented and too competitive to waste her prime years with an organization that doesn't appreciate what they have. The comparison to other markets is particularly telling. Imagine if Caitlin Clark were playing in New York or Boston right now with this kind of organizational dysfunction. Sports radio would be absolutely destroying the management every single day. The media pressure would be relentless and changes would be demanded immediately. But because they are in Indianapolis, they think they can get away with this kind of backwards thinking. They are counting on the Midwest nice attitude to protect them from the criticism they absolutely deserve. The reality is that every single person who shows up to Fever games is there primarily because of Caitlin Clark. Every television viewer who tunes in is doing so because they want to see what she does next. Every social media interaction, every article written, every highlight shared, it all revolves around her impact on the game. To pretend otherwise isn't just dishonest, it's insulting to the intelligence of everyone who follows the sport. Fans aren't stupid. They know exactly why the WNBA is experiencing unprecedented growth. And it's not because of brilliant organizational leadership. The emergency contact video situation becomes even more relevant in this context. When your own teammates don't even mention your franchise player as someone they'd call in an emergency, and then your executives go public talking about not wanting to rely too heavily on that same player, it paints a picture of an organization that fundamentally doesn't understand what they have. But here's where the karma part gets really interesting. Almost immediately after these comments went public, the criticism started affecting the organization's reputation. Fans began questioning their loyalty to the franchise. Media members started calling out the backwards thinking. Even other players in the league seemed to take notice of the dysfunction. The Fever went from being the feel-good story of the WNBA to being seen as an organization that doesn't deserve their good fortune. That's not the kind of brand building they were probably hoping for when they decided to run their mouths. And let's be honest about what this really represents. This is an organization that got incredibly lucky when Caitlin Clark decided to enter the draft. And instead of being grateful for that stroke of fortune, they're acting like they somehow earned it through their superior basketball operations. The truth is, without Caitlin Clark, the Indiana Fever would still be completely irrelevant. They'd still be playing in front of half-empty arenas, still struggling to get any media attention, still fighting just to stay financially viable. She literally saved their franchise, and their response is to publicly diminish her importance. It's the kind of short-sighted thinking that destroys organizations. When you have a once-in-a-generation talent, you don't take them for granted. You don't assume they'll always be there. You build everything around maximizing their impact and showing them they are valued. The comparison to what Texas would do with Caitlin Clark is particularly telling. There are markets out there that would absolutely embrace having a player of her caliber. Cities that would build their entire sports identity around showcasing her talents. Organizations that would move heaven and earth to make sure she's happy and successful. Meanwhile, the Fever out here talking about wanting to be like Apple while actively undermining their most valuable asset. It's the kind of thinking that makes you wonder how these people got into positions of leadership in the first place. The All-Star Game situation adds another layer to this mess. When Sonia Citron talks about being excited to play with Caitlin Clark, it highlights something important. Other players around the league recognize her value and impact. They are excited about the opportunity to share the court with her. But her own organization seems more concerned with making sure she doesn't overshadow anyone else. It's backwards thinking that's going to cost them in the long run if they don't wake up and realize what they are doing wrong. The shooting struggles we've been seeing from Caitlyn this season make these comments even more tone-deaf. When your superstar is fighting through systematic issues that are affecting her performance, the last thing you want to do is publicly question her importance to the franchise instead of addressing the real problems, like the motion offense that doesn't suit her skills, the ball movement issues, the teammates who don't pass. They're worried about brand management and making sure everyone gets their fair share of attention. It's the kind of thinking that loses championships and wastes generational talents. When you have a player who can single-handedly change the trajectory of your franchise, you don't worry about spreading the wealth. You worry about maximizing their impact and building a winning culture around them. The fact that they are already talking about adding more players and continuing to build suggests they think the current dysfunction is sustainable. They seem to believe that Caitlyn Clark will just accept whatever role they give her and be happy to be part of their enduring brand. But that's not how elite competitors work. They don't accept mediocrity. They don't settle for organizations that don't maximize their potential. And they certainly don't stick around when leadership publicly questions their value. What makes this situation even more absurd is how they're treating Aaliyah Boston in all of this. Boston has been the perfect complement to Caitlyn's game, embracing her role and thriving because she understands how to play alongside a generational playmaker. Yet, somehow, the organization thinks this organic chemistry happened despite their star player rather than because of her. The irony here is thick enough to cut with a knife. They want to build a sustainable brand while actively working against the sustainability of their most important relationship. They want longevity while creating conditions that make their cornerstone player want to leave. Speaking of leaving, let's address the elephant in the room about contract situations and player movement in the WNBA. Players have more options now than ever before, and organizations that don't treat their stars properly are finding themselves on the wrong end of those decisions. The league has evolved to a point where superstar players can actually have leverage, and smart organizations are adapting to that reality. The Fever seem to be operating under outdated assumptions about player loyalty and market dynamics. When you have a player who can literally transform your entire business model, you adapt your organization to serve their success. You don't expect them to adapt to your mediocrity. That's Business 101, but apparently they didn't get that memo in Indianapolis. The attendance figures tell the whole story here. Before Caitlyn Clark, the Fever were lucky to get 5,000 people in the building for most games. Now they are selling out regularly and have waiting lists for season tickets. But sure, let's pretend that's because of superior organizational culture and not because people want to see the best player in the world. The television ratings are even more telling. Games featuring Caitlyn Clark regularly draw audiences that are multiples of what other WNBA games achieve. She single-handedly expanded the audience for women's basketball in ways that seemed impossible just 2 years ago. Yet somehow, the brain trust in Indianapolis thinks this growth would continue regardless of how they treat their star. They seem to believe that fans are showing up for the Indiana Fever brand rather than for the opportunity to watch greatness in person. The merchandise sales tell a similar story. Caitlyn Clark jerseys and gear fly off the shelves while other players' merchandise sits collecting dust. The economic impact is measurable and undeniable, but apparently not obvious enough for the people making decisions. What's particularly galling about these comments is the timing relative to her on-court struggles this season. When your franchise player is clearly fighting through systematic issues that are affecting her performance, you rally around her and fix the problems. You don't use that moment to remind everyone that you're not too dependent on her success. The coaching situation with Stephanie White adds another layer of complexity here. White seems to be implementing systems that don't maximize Caitlyn's strengths. And instead of addressing that disconnect, the front office is talking about brand diversification. It's like they're actively trying to prove they can succeed despite the best player rather than because of her. That's not organizational strength. That's organizational stupidity disguised as independence. The motion offense that White has implemented is a perfect example of this backwards thinking. Instead of building an offense around Caitlyn's unique ability to create advantages for teammates, they're running a system that minimizes her touches and impact. The message this sends to other players around the league is also problematic. When you publicly diminish your own superstar, You're telling every other talented player that your organization doesn't really understand how to maximize elite talent. The free agency implications of this kind of thinking are staggering. When players are deciding where to sign, they look at how organizations treat the best players. That if you're publicly downplaying your superstar's importance, that's not exactly a recruiting pitch for other elite talents. Sonia Citron's comments about being excited to play with Caitlin in the All-Star Game highlight something the Fever leadership seems to miss. Other players recognize greatness and want to be associated with it. They are not worried about being overshadowed. They are excited about the opportunity to play alongside someone special. That's the mentality successful organizations cultivate. They embrace having elite talent and build cultures where everyone understands their role in maximizing that talent. They don't apologize for having advantages or worry about spreading attention around equally. The ultimate irony here is that by trying to protect themselves from being too dependent on Caitlin Clark, they're actually making themselves more vulnerable to losing her. When you don't fully appreciate what you have, you create conditions where that asset becomes available to organizations that do that. If you're publicly downplaying your superstar's importance, that's not exactly a recruiting pitch for other elite talents. Sonia Citron's comments about being excited to play with Caitlin in the All-Star Game highlight something the Fever leadership seems to miss. Other players recognize greatness and want to be associated with it. They are not worried about being overshadowed. They are excited about the opportunity to play alongside someone special. That's the mentality successful organizations cultivate. They embrace having elite talent and build cultures where everyone understands their role in maximizing that talent. They don't apologize for having advantages or worry about spreading attention around equally. The ultimate irony here is that by trying to protect themselves from being too dependent on Caitlin Clark, they're actually making themselves more vulnerable to losing her. When you don't fully appreciate what you have, you create conditions where that asset becomes available to organizations that do.